There was an interesting part of Tuesday's debate for State Superintendent of Public Instruction that caught a lot of people's attention, mostly because it's been the center of attention for roughly 2 years when it comes to education. Critical race theory permeating Idaho's public schools. Two of the candidates, current Superintendent Chair Ibarra and former President of the State Board of Education, Debbie Critchfield, said, despite parents' concerns, it's not. The third candidate, former state legislator Brandon Durst, said it is. And when asked for specific examples, he offered this.
The first is the Portrait of the Graduate program that they have in the Coeur d'Alene School District. It's a version of critical race theory of social justice indoctrination that they're being pushed system-wide in the Coeur d'Alene schools.
System-wide in Coeur d'Alene schools, Durst said. And we've talked about this several times. These accusations of social justice indoctrination in schools, critical race theory, unknowingly, insidiously being taught to our children, from college kids to as young as preschoolers. And when we look into it, every school district, teacher, administrator, they tell us it's just not the case. These accusers are at worst conflict entrepreneurs and at least ill-informed. But Durst hasn't been the only one accusing schools in Coeur d'Alene of pushing CRT. Last fall, there was an election for the Coeur d'Alene School Board. Leslie Bjerke was one of the candidates for Zone 4, and she won by just 23 votes. But during the campaign, she participated in a Zoom Q&A back in October, and she said this about Portrait of a Graduate in Coeur d'Alene schools.
So as I went through Portrait of a Graduate, the word equity is a constant. I mean, that word has been used all over the place. That is definitely within critical race theory. So you may not be teaching the actual theory, but you actually have components in it. And these components are being woven in through every aspect of your child's curriculum at this point. We've moved away from strong academics more to emotions. And while I understand teaching very young children that emotions are something that comes up organically throughout the day, we never used to carve out special time to teach a child how to identify the colors of their emotion or how many emotions they felt during the day. These are all under the umbrella of critical race theory.
You know, we never used to carve out part of the day for active shooter drills either, but here we are. And I digress. Emotions are under the umbrella of CRT? That might be the loosest definition of a postgraduate academic concept, legal analysis that is usually reserved for students of law. Emotions? And that's where most of these claims lose their credibility, with all these loose definitions of critical race theory. So, by the way, we reached out to Brandon Durst and to Bjerke there to get their take on what specifically they were talking about when it comes to Portrait of a Candidate in Coeur d'Alene. We have yet to hear back. But how about how candidate Durst defined CRT Tuesday night?
It's a Marxist theology or theory that says we place people into two groups. And instead of using economic terms for those groups, we use racial groups. One group has been oppressed and the other group is doing the oppressing. And those that have been doing the oppressing should feel shame for what they have done. They should feel shame for their heritage. That's wrong.
That is wrong. That it's happening, or your definition of it, or both. Because critical race theory, which has been around for 4 decades, at its core says racism is not just an individual bias or prejudice, but it's embedded in legal systems and policies. This from the American Bar Association. CRT is not diversity or inclusion training, but a practice of looking critically at the role of race and racism in society and questioning it. They quoted the legal scholar who coined the term critical race theory, that'd be Kimberly Crenshaw, who said CRT is not a noun, but a verb. And while it is evolving and malleable, it critiques how the social construction of race and institutionalized racism perpetrate a racial caste system that relegates people of color to the bottom tiers. It also includes other identities like sexuality and gender identity. CRT also recognizes racism as not an old concept, a relic of the past. It analyzes how the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship based on race continues to be a thing in this country. Again, that's from the American Bar Association. And you don't have to go too far back to see it. Jim Crow laws, redlining of neighborhoods, white-only property deeds here in Idaho, criminal justice policies of the 1990s. Or how about how difficult it is today to build affordable housing in a majority white advantaged neighborhood? But back to what Brandon Durst said about the Coeur d'Alene School District, how CRT is being pushed system-wide. Well, we brought that quote to the school district today and asked Katie Grotman, the district's director of curriculum, about CRT in CDA schools.
One group has been oppressed, and the other group is doing the oppressing. And those that have been doing the oppressing should feel shame for what they have done. They should feel shame for their heritage.
I've listened to Mr. Durst's definition of CRT, which he talked about as one group making one group feel like they are oppressed and another group feel like they are an oppressor, or dividing people by race. And that is not at all what we do in the Coeur d'Alene School District.
The first is the Portrait of the Graduate program that they have in the Coeur d'Alene School District. It's a version of critical race theory of social justice indoctrination that they're being pushed system-wide in the Coeur d'Alene schools.
That quote from Brandon, what do you think of that?
I just think that Brandon doesn't really know what our Portrait of a Graduate is or does. It's not a program. What it is it's a portrait or a picture that has been created by our community about what we want our graduates, our students to look like and be like when they leave us. And we engaged in months of dialogue with our community, with civic stakeholders, with business owners, and we just simply asked them, what is it that you want our graduates to be like and be able to do when they leave our system? And it boiled down to 6 main things.
They came up with this wheel of skills, 6 C's they called it: critical thinking, collaboration, character, content knowledge, communication, and creativity.
You know, there are a lot of challenges that they'll be encountering in the world, and they need to be able to be creative and problem solving around them. As we think about what we bring into our district or how we set things up for our students, we consider those 6 criteria. And it's puzzling to me to understand how that is tied in any way to critical race theory.
There's also this idea that maybe it's not technically CRT, but it is social emotional learning, this SEL, the other acronym that people like to throw around. Is social emotional learning a bad thing in schools?
So when we talk about social emotional learning, what we're talking about is helping kids learn how to share, to learn how to disagree without attacking each other, to learn how to apologize when they make a mistake and accidentally hurt a peer, and to learn how to work together and have their needs met in ways that are healthy and productive as part of living in a classroom community.
The district had been working on their Portrait of a Graduate for 3 years, and in February of 2020, they were thrilled to introduce it.
I think we'd be excited to do that. It's just to see how far it's come along the way and their input and the feedback that we've gotten. You know, it's almost not a secret anymore, right? So many people have given us feedback on this. To finally be to this point is like, well, people are saying, well, aren't you guys done with that? But we've been working on each and every iteration to make sure we capture the voice of as many as we could.
This isn't just like, here's a program, follow it. It was developed by all kinds of people in your community.
Exactly. Yes. Over multiple listening sessions, over multiple opportunities to interact with various stakeholders in our community, parents, civic partners, businesses, making sure that we are listening because we value very much what our community wants and says about education.
Why then do you think that there's this big pushback after taking so many years to develop this with the community's help? Now all of a sudden it's a problem.
I think that there might have been people who were not engaged in the process, who don't understand necessarily how this came to be. And so it's part of my job just to help people understand that and that this isn't some sort of outside product that is being pushed on our community. Rather, it's our community responding to what they want, and it's us responding to our community's goals.
Again, we did reach out to candidate Durst and trustee Bjerke to ask what about Coeur d'Alene's Portrait of a Graduate specifically they see as CRT, other than the word equity. We have not yet heard back. So Portrait of a Graduate is a national program created by a company in Ohio called Battelle for Kids, at whose core values are diversity, equity, and inclusion. How those are applied are completely up to each local school community. And there are unique portraits of a graduate all over the country. Katie told us while they used Battelle to get started, it was simply that, a starting point for starting a conversation with the Coeur d'Alene community. The outcome was not predetermined at all, she said. It took 3 years after all. You may be wondering, after all this time, why are we still talking about this? Well, because these accusations keep coming up by people who would like you to give them permission and the power to make decisions for you and your kids. And it's our job to look into these things, because if what they're telling us is true, it sounds pretty scary. But consistently, when we bring these claims to the source, to the actual people who are charged and given the responsibility to educate your kids, they tell us and they show us it's not true. And you can find out for yourself, not through us, not through a website or talk radio or social media. All the school districts in Idaho are literally and figuratively open books when it comes to curriculum. Curriculum that is collaborated by each local community.